You're listening to episode 18 of A Whole New You podcast. On today's show, we're interviewing Kathy Bero, a stage 4 cancer survivor. She talks to us about how she stopped traditional treatment and opted to heal herself with food, meditation, Reiki, and other practices. This is an episode that may just be life-changing. Please be sure to share this one with family and friends, especially anyone suffering from cancer. Welcome to A Whole New You podcast. I'm your co-host, Kim Maravich. I'm a registered nurse and author of the book 360 Health. I'm joined by my dear friend, Lori Biddle, a health and wellness coach certified through the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. Our show exists to inspire and empower women to take charge of their health, with weekly tips and conversation about self-care, mindset, nutrition, fitness, and clean living. Please keep in mind that the material provided in this podcast is intended as general information only and should not be used as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. We're thrilled to have you here. Let's get to the show. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode. Today, we are pleased to have Kathy Bero joining us on the show. This, for sure, is an episode you will want to share with your family and friends, and especially with anyone suffering from cancer or who has had a cancer diagnosis. Kathy Mydlach Bero's remarkable recovery from 2 rare and aggressive forms of cancer took her advocacy work into a whole new arena. She is an international best-selling author, speaker, consultant, Reiki master, and integrative health and cancer coach, working to change the way we look at chronic disease. Her best-selling book, E.A.T, An Unconventional Decade in the Life of a Cancer Patient, was written in journal format and is based on the 18 journals Kathy kept during her battle with these 2 cancers. Prior to her cancer diagnosis, Kathy's work ranged widely to include advocacy, facilitation, and consultation, along with leadership development in the U.S. and abroad. Bero has been recognized nationally for her significant contributions in environmental advocacy and education, and she executive produced the 2-time Emmy Award-winning documentary, Worth Fighting For. Kathy, we are so honored to have you here on the show. So welcome.
Well, thank you. I'm so grateful to be here.
Yeah, we've been looking forward to this for a very long time. As our listeners know, I did some work in research on cancer prevention, and I discovered Kathy through that. And I actually saw Kathy, our local news channel ran a segment about Kathy and her work and her survival from these cancers. And I believe you told me, Kathy, that segment, that television segment kind of went viral. Is that right?
It did. It kind of freaked me out. Yeah, there were people from literally all over the world, including Korea and India and Japan, and reaching out to me. And it did take me by surprise because I thought it was just going to air locally, and I'm so not aware of how the internet works. I didn't realize it was going to go crazy. So that was a pleasant surprise, I guess.
That is very exciting. And Kathy, where are you located?
I'm in Wisconsin.
Listeners? In Wisconsin. Okay. Yeah. That's wonderful. So kudos to you for that. And that's very exciting. That just shows how important this message is to not only, our community, and not even just to those in the United States, but throughout the world. So you are an ambassador of hope, I would say.
Thank you.
Sure. So we know that this episode is not only going to be fascinating, but like I said, it's going to be a message of inspiration and hope to our listeners as well. So just to start, could you tell us a little bit about your background in history and your life leading up to your cancer diagnosis?
Sure. I was always very healthy. And I say that not lightly, that I was always healthy before I got cancer. And I think that's true of a lot of people who are diagnosed, that we feel like we're very healthy. We're exercising, we're eating well, we like our work, but we don't realize how much stress we're under. So for me, for example, I work 14-hour days. I felt my work was in environmental advocacy. And so I felt the weight of the world all the time on my shoulders, in addition to other stressors in life. So it was quite a shock for me when I was diagnosed. And then to be diagnosed with stage 4 was kind of crazy. So leading up to the diagnosis, I had been sick. I had had my mammogram in April, and I started feeling very sick, and they couldn't really pinpoint what it was. And they thought maybe it was Lyme's disease. And I saw all sorts of doctors, and it wasn't. It wasn't until actually my horse Simon started pushing at my chest kind of aggressively, like kind of naughty. Earlier, when I had him before I had babies, so when I got pregnant with my first child, he told me I was pregnant. He was like all nuzzly in the stomach, and I had been told I couldn't have babies. I had a blood clot disorder, and so I was really surprised to find out that I had a baby. I was pregnant.
That is cool.
Yeah, and so Simon did that again with my second daughter, and when I had cancer growing in my body, he wasn't so snuggly. He was more aggressive about it. He didn't like it. And it was after all sorts of doctor's appointments and kind of like, why is he behaving this way? That I got out of the shower one night and I saw this little red spot on my chest. It was on my right breast. And it was surreal because I immediately knew what it was. It's just like I knew. And called my sister-in-law, who was a physician's assistant at Memorial Sloan Kettering in New York. And without telling me what it was, she knew exactly what it was. And she gave me this sort of dialogue or these lists. It was a dialogue that was going to kind of play out the next day. I'm going to go to my doctor. They're going to say this. I'm going to say that. They're going to say this. I'm going to say, and it played out exactly how she said it would. And she didn't tell me at the time that it was inflammatory breast cancer, and she just kind of let the biopsies play out. But by about a week into it, it was confirmed as inflammatory breast cancer, and then it ultimately ended up being stage 4 inflammatory breast cancer. And she really did save my life because here in Wisconsin, they didn't have the latest way of treating it. So when I went to the oncologist for my first appointment, I said, I let them tell me what they wanted to do. And then I said, well, that's very different from what my sister-in-law said they do at Sloan Kettering. And he was so gracious, and he got on the phone with them and he got the new protocol. So in part, that was life-saving for me.
Absolutely.
And then about a year later, I was diagnosed with a high-grade tumor in my head and neck. And so that was really sort of between those two diagnoses. I was learning a little bit about food as medicine. I was practicing meditation. I was, practicing visualization. But by that second diagnosis, that was the kick to the curb for me. It was like, you better wake up. And that's when I really got serious about food and started using Reiki. And about the third year into it, in 2008, my organs were failing because of all the drugs that they were throwing at me. And I made a decision. I felt like I knew enough, and I felt confident enough in the power of energy healing and the power of using food as medicine that I decided I'm not making any headway by continuing to take their protocol. So I'm done. I told my oncologist I'm off the protocol train. And truthfully, the final straw for me was a drug that made me crazy in the head. And so I would see myself almost like an out-of-body yelling at my kids for no reason, just raging. And I just said that, this is unacceptable. If I'm going to die, which everyone thought I would, then I want my kids to love me. And if I live, I want them to love me too. So right now this is not leading to that. So I'm done. Yeah. And so, in their mind, 21 months was my expected lifespan. That's the average for someone with stage 4 inflammatory breast cancer. And I was at about 3 years. So it was a win all the way around. And yeah, so much to their surprise, I kept getting better.
That's incredible. Now, how many years out are you now?
Let's see. I got to do the math.
I surprised you with that one.
Right. 14 years. 14. Yeah.
So a 21.
It'll be 14 years in October. Sorry. Yeah.
That is incredible. A 21-month life expectancy to 14 years. My goodness.
And, I think the point of that is that because I coach patients, and of course, once you're in the world of cancer, a lot of people with cancer. And I'm sure most of us have someone in our life who's experienced it. And the thing that continues to floor me is when doctors tell patients, we give you about 2 years, we give you about 3 years, give you about and if you don't listen and you get yourself going on the right path, they're going to be wrong. And that's really a good feeling to make sure they're wrong.
That sure is. So just to backtrack for a moment, you did go through surgery, chemo. Did you have radiation?
I did.
As well, radiation?
Yeah. Okay. So the protocol for inflammatory, because it's extremely aggressive. So I had my mammogram in April, and by October it was stage 4. But my mammogram detected nothing. And the reason it detected nothing is that inflammatory breast cancer forms sort of like sheets of tumors or nests. It doesn't form a hard, like a tumor that you imagine to be somewhat circular, like a nodule kind of thing. And so they're not really detectable, or they weren't at that time on those mammograms. And so by the time I was diagnosed, it was going crazy. It was already in my dermis, my skin. And ultimately what it likes to do is hit the dermal lymphatics, the lymph system in your skin, so that it can hit every part of your body. And that's kind of how it operates. So for me at that time, I didn't even know that there were alternatives available. And I'm not really sure for inflammatory breast cancer there are. I think you have to take an integrative approach, which is, I think, the best way to go, because there's good on, in conventional medicine, there's good in unconventional medicine. But there's also bad in both, So
Sure.
I did do chemotherapy. Then I had surgery. Then I had radiation.
Okay.
And that was protocol. I don't know how I would have done it differently if I was diagnosed today. I'm sure I would do some things differently. But I'm not really sure what they would be, because I think once you're diagnosed with cancer, things change in your mind. I think it's easy for somebody else to say, don't do conventional if they have never been diagnosed.
Sure.
But when you're diagnosed, there's a fear factor that comes into play, and so we have to kind of weigh that. So
yeah, and you just come at it with everything you've got, right? You take every approach.
I
love that.
I totally agree with that. My sister-in-law said to me, and she's pretty conservative with the way she practices, and I would come to her with, I didn't even know what Reiki was, but somebody said, you should try Reiki, or you should try these foods. And I said, what do you think? And she said, do you want to get to the end and say I should have? She said, try it all. Try it all. So that's what I did.
And clearly it's working.
Yeah, right. And it works for lots of other people too. I mean, it's amazing to me. It's amazing to me that this isn't part of protocol, really. But we're getting there.
Yeah. So Kathy, this is Lori, and I'm so glad that before the interview, I got to chat with you for a few minutes, because I totally have chills just listening to you talk, because I read your book and I feel like I have walked through everything you went through along with you, and just hearing you talk about it and getting to chat with you live is just, I'm just so thrilled about it. But, I would love to hear about, how you came to write your book, and just kind of tell all of our listeners about the structure and the layout. And it's just so vulnerable and so powerful. And I just love for them to hear a little bit more about it.
That truly means so much to me. It really does, because I kind of fought this for a long time. Once I knew I was getting better, I started a nonprofit organization with the help of my hospital. And it was called New Genesis, and it was focused on teaching about food as medicine. And it got to where I really enjoy one-on-one conversation with people, and I really enjoy being able to help a person, right? But it just got to the point where there were way too many people. And then when I would be asked to speak, generally you give a presentation for an hour, and it just wasn't enough time to cover everything. And people kept saying to me, when are you going to write a book? When are you going to, really starting in like 2009, you should write a book. And I'm like, nobody wants to hear my story. There's so many other stories out there. And, I was very much minimizing the importance of what I went through, because I went through it. I was on the other side of it. Now I'm done. And I'm looking at all these other people who are suffering so severely and thinking, what they're going through is far more what I went through. And at some point, my oncologist said, I think you forgot what you went through. Like, you should probably remember that. But finally, and there were all these like weird situations where I was getting a massage, and the massage therapist would have been intuitive. And they said, oh, how's that book going that you're writing? I'm not writing a book. Then my Reiki master said, oh, you're going to write a book. And I'm like, no, I'm really not going to write a book. And it wasn't until I actually have a bunch of children's books I've written. And one of them was published years ago. And I decided to go to Madison for this children's book publishing event. And I was talking to one of the presenters who's an author. And she was just kind of asking about me. And we got to talking about my story. And she said, oh, that's the story you have to write. You have to write that. So I literally went home. That was 2013. And I just started writing. And I got about 50 pages into it. And I gave it to two of my closest friends. And I just said, I'm just sitting in my house writing about myself. Like, this is weird. I'm not really good about this. And then my girlfriend, who I've known since 7th grade, she said, I don't think you get it. This is not about you. And I went, oh, okay. That's what I needed to hear. I needed to understand that writing my story wasn't about me. And that actually changed everything about the way I wrote it. So I pulled out all of my journals, and I had about 18 journals over a 10-year period. And I decided to just be in the 10-year period, have a decade. And I just went from the beginning of my journals, and I wrote my book based on my journals. And
I bet it was hard for you, even going back through that, like reliving it, some of those moments had to have been tough.
I think, I hear people say that kind of thing's cathartic and whatever. To me, it wasn't any of that. I had already been doing a lot of work meditating, and I've had a lot of Reiki, and I was really working on kind of evolving already. And so for me, it was more a realization of how much of my memory I lost. I had no idea things that I'd written in my journal, I had no idea they happened. And what was really kind of funny is when I finished the book and I gave it to my Reiki master, and he read it, and he said, there's one correction I would have had you make. And I was like, okay, what's that? And he said, I only saw you 7 times. But in my journal, I had written, I had Reiki, I had Reiki, I had Reiki, I had Reiki. And he's like, here's my records. And so Reiki that's the beauty of Reiki, actually. It just continues to work on you. So it was that kind of stuff, these realizations that, wow, my memory, I really lost a lot of my memory. And I was really grateful that I had the journals. And I can't encourage your listeners enough. You know, even if you're healthy, just keep a journal, because as we get older, we lose memories. And it's so fun to go back and read about. I mean, for me, some of it wasn't fun, but to read about the positive things that happened, or just even to reflect on who you were at a given time, because hopefully we all evolve. And so for me, that book is really about taking on one of life's challenges and digging. I mean, and for me, this was the biggest challenge of my life for sure, and digging really deep to evolve into your own best advocate and transform your life. And that's why it's called E.A.T, Evolve, Advocate, Transform.
That's so good.
And a lot of people are like, well, for a title like E.A.T, you know, should be all about food. And it's like, no, no. But,
Yeah.
but obviously there's, you know, a double meaning there.
And I think it's such a great companion for anyone who is facing a diagnosis, to just know that I'm not the only one who's gone through this, and I'm not the only one who's had these thoughts when I was going through it. I mean, you share a lot of very intimate things, and again, just a great companion for someone facing this. They're not alone, you know. And you're right. You were able to reach so many more people by writing this book than you ever could one-on-one.
Yeah.
And we're just, you know, so thankful that you did this.
I
and
really
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I really appreciate that. And I really encourage everybody who's got a story, no matter what their story, to write it, you know, even if it's just for themselves or their family. But I do believe that you know, so often when I'm speaking at an event, people will come up to me, and my favorite thing is just to hang out and let people come and talk to me. And I get so many great stories, and inevitably there will be a handful of people who will say, I never talk about this, and then they start talking. And I think by sharing our stories, we make other people feel more comfortable to share theirs. And that's just really what it's all about, you know?
Definitely. And I know your whole message is not centered around food. There's so much involved, but I would like to just kind of revisit a little bit, you know, what you wrote about in the book and what role foods played in your recovery, and just kind of get into some specific foods too that were, you know, most beneficial for you as you were going through this.
Sure. Excuse me. Well, I have, if any of your listeners want to subscribe to my website, when they subscribe, a link will pop up for them to print off a list of foods. And this is a list of foods that I used. And it's a list of foods that was developed for me with food scientists who were studying specifically how anti-angiogenic, and I'll explain that in a minute, foods fight cancer. So angiogenesis is the creation of blood vessels, which in our bodies is happening for men when they're healing a wound, primarily. And for women, we're healing a wound, we're menstruating, or we're pregnant. When it's happening in that context, that's very healthy and very healing. But because of our lifestyle today, we are creating inflammation in our bodies, and that is encouraging angiogenesis to happen outside of a balanced system. So when blood vessels start to grow in an unbalanced way, we know disease is present. And there's over 70 different diseases that depend on angiogenesis, or, you know, the blood vessel growth that's out of balance. And they include all the top ones, you know, arthritis, heart disease, macular degeneration, obesity, cancer, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. These are all chronic illnesses that are created basically through lifestyle, you know, whether we're stressed out or we're eating poorly or we drink too much or we smoke or we, you know, any number of things that we do in our lives that aren't helping us. Um, and of course, now we know, I mean, we've known this for a long time, but there's finally science out that shows the majority of cancers, for example, and deaths, actually deaths in general in the United States, are caused by the poor quality of our food. And
So sad, isn't it?
it's
Oh,
so
I
sad.
know.
And I think people in general have a false idea that cancer is mostly genetic or hereditary. Only 5% of cancers are hereditary. And even of those 5%, it's not a guarantee that you're going to be diagnosed if you change the way you live your life. So you live your life to work against disease, you're going to have a much easier time. So anyway,
Wow, yeah, that's crazy how much of it's environmental. That's crazy.
well,
Yeah.
and you think about all the chemicals in our system, and for me, this is like a full circle, right? Because I used to work in environmental,
Yes.
yeah, and so all of the things that we were being kind of told as environmental advocates, you're crazy, you're tree huggers, you're bunny lovers, it's like I am all that, and I would really love to not be poisoned every day. Like that would be really awesome. you know and I find it so incomprehensible that we allow ourselves to be poisoned every day. We bear the burden of what that does in our bodies. Then we bear the burden of what that does financially to try to fix that. And the majority of, now I'm getting a little on a soapbox, but the majority of bankruptcies are still related to healthcare. And really, we have to back it up, and we have to look at preventing. That's the true healthcare reform, is prevention. So to that end, this list of foods, these guys put together for me because they were anti-angiogenic and cancer fighting. It's not meant to be a comprehensive list of all foods on the planet that are anti-angiogenic and cancer fighting. This list is my list. And that's what generally people ask for, is what did you do? The only difference on the list is I have included beef and pork because some people really do like beef and pork, and you can eat it safely by getting grass-fed, locally grown, clean food. Just not my preference. But so foods on this list for me, the most important foods are the vegetables and the berries. So with the vegetables, then there comes the berries and the fruit. And berries, for example, black raspberries, strawberries, blueberries, they have been shown to be so powerful at fighting cancer, the anthocyanins in the purple color. And in fact, purple foods in general, you should really go for, because they have higher levels of cancer-fighting anthocyanins. And black raspberries are now really, back when I was starting on this, the research was early, but they were being shown to stop cancers even as aggressive as pancreatic and esophageal. Now we know today, because so much study's been done worldwide, that in fact, black raspberries are being used in more than 15 cancer clinics in the United States, and I think they're being used in Canada as well. So this is a really important food for us, but to get it in therapeutic doses, you got to get the black raspberry powder. And I always recommend berrihealth because they are excellent people who are not out to make as much money as they possibly can. Although I know they were happy to start breaking even, in the last couple of years. But they process the berries. They have a patent on the way they do that. And if you take their powder and toss it in the dirt, 70% of those seeds are going to sprout because they've maintained the integrity of that fruit. So there's tons of knockoffs out there, and Dr. Oz even promotes one that if you look at the difference in color, it's like yellow in a capsule, but it's the purple we're looking for. So anyway, black raspberries were really important. And I recommend to all my clients that they use black raspberries every day. And everybody has great outcomes with that. There's no side effects, none of that.
Yeah, just other benefits, right?
Right. Just the important stuff.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think one of the side effects, like the only side effect they really identify is in some people, maybe they get a little diarrhea, So for me, it's like, I'll live with that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And glowing skin and heart health and all the
Right,
things,
right,
the other benefits that come with it too.
right.
So
And it's hard to get those berries because they're hard to cultivate. They grow wild everywhere, but maybe not south, but in like the upper half of the United States. Once in a while, you can get them frozen, but I just suggest going to berrihealth. Okay, so aside from the berries, the vegetables is where I really focus my attention. So every day at every meal, I have onions and garlic. I put it in my eggs. I put it on my sandwiches. I put it in my salads. It's literally in every meal, and they're one of the top fighters of cancer. Kale is one that I'm sure you've heard about. I'm sure your listeners have heard about. Very powerful. However, it does cause some problems. Kale and spinach, for example, can cause kidney stones. So for people who are putting kale and spinach in their smoothies every day, I really encourage you to back it off and maybe 3 times a week, but definitely not every day. But that's one of the powerful cancer fighters. Leeks, collard greens, Brussels sprouts. I mean, any of the cruciferous family are going to be really good for fighting cancer. It's a long list, but and then making sure you're adding herbs into your every meal. So I mean, here's an example I think of. We've gone so far off track with fresh food. When I was running at New Genesis, we had these classes for kids. I was trying to come up with like what's going to bring kids in, because we really need to teach them, and through kids we teach parents. That's the way it is. At least that's my experience. Parents learn from their kids. So these kids,
and parents will do anything for their kids,
well,
but
that's right.
sometimes they won't do it for themselves, right? I've noticed that too. So.
Well, and I've noticed the flip side where you go to a restaurant and parents are ordering their kids chicken fingers and the parents are eating a beautiful salad. Like,
right, that's true.
What is
that's
that
true.
all about? Like, come on.
Yeah.
But so I decided we're going to have a pizza garden, and our local organic food store donated the money to build a pizza oven and develop this garden. And the only rule was the kids could pick whatever they wanted to pick, but they had to eat everything that they picked on their pizza.
Oh, that's so fun.
And so,
I love that.
yeah, so they would go through the garden, they'd pick beans and carrots and beets and whatever. And then we had chefs that would help them prepare it and put it on their pizza, and we'd stick it in the pizza oven. And, in like 3 minutes, they'd have this great pizza. Often, when the kids were being dropped off by the parents would say, "I apologize ahead of time. My child's not being rude. They just don't like vegetables." And I'd be like, ha, ha, ha. Joke's on you, Mom. So then at the end, the parents would say, "Are you kidding? How did you get them to eat those?" And really, because those kids would devour pizza with beans on it, and carrots. And the point is, one, you got to involve your kids in their food. Two, when food is grown organically in good, solid soil, it tastes differently. And if you don't believe me, try it out. Go to a local farm, get some produce from them, and then go to the grocery store and get the same stuff and try it. There's a huge difference between the two. And the big difference is that the organically grown, clean foods are packed with nutrients. And our bodies, we have taste buds because they tell us what we need, what our body needs. They're not there to be like, "Oh, I got dessert, yay." It's, what does my body need? Oh, I need this food. we taste it, our body takes the nutrients, puts it where it needs to go, and we are healthier. That's obviously a very oversimplified version of how the system works, but it is how, basically how it works. And so these kids, they're just trusting their gut, so to speak, and their taste buds. It's like,
and they got to pick it themselves.
They
like
were
that probably just changed everything for them.
absolutely. Everything that we taught at New Genesis was based on what I was doing with my kids, because I did a lot of experimenting. I was too tired to cook 2 meals, so they were eating what I was eating. End of story. And so I had different tricks. So, for example, I wanted them to eat kale. Of course, all kids eat corn. So we have, the Packers are part of our family history, my husband's side. His great uncle was on the first Packer team. And so big deal in our family, the Packers, and of course in Wisconsin. And so I said, I'm going to make them Packer corn. So I chopped up a bunch of kale, mixed it in with corn and some onions and some garlic. And oh my goodness, they were so excited to eat kale. And so
I love those tricks. Yes,
it's just
they're key.
Be creative. And sometimes I think adults need that too,
Mm-hmm.
But
Yep.
so we just really, by the time I was diagnosed with my head and neck cancer, we went all in on the food and actually started growing our own food. And at the time we lived on a farm. We had a 60-acre farm. And I took my horse's outdoor arena and turned it into this giant garden. And so we grew about 80% of our food. We had chickens, and much to my chagrin, a few years into it, my husband wanted to grow a cow. That didn't make me very happy, but we did. And we did that for about 7 years and realized it's very hard to grow your own food. And we all should very much appreciate our local farmers.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. And in our area, after about 7 years, the local farming community was really growing. Organic farmers were popping up, and CSAs. And so my husband and I just looked at each other one day and we said, are we kidding ourselves? Like, let's go support our local farmers.
Yeah.
So,
yep, I've made friends with our local organic farmers too, and they are like my lifeline. I can't wait for this next month here for everything to start up. It's very exciting.
It's so exciting.
I know. So, Kathy, are you still eating a lot of the same foods to kind of like maintain your remission, as you did during your healing process?
Okay.
This is just kind of your lifestyle now?
So I love this question, because I think a lot of people think I can't do that because it's so hard. And it's not sustainable. And so this is what I say to that. I did it for 4 years, very extreme, no sugar, no processed foods. Everything was made fresh. When I would go out to a restaurant, which wasn't often during those 4 years, I would order from the sides list, the Brussels sprouts or the beans, or, knowing that I wasn't getting organic most of the time, but that's okay, because I can counteract that with my black raspberries and, other things.
Mm-hmm.
So you can still go out, not every day, or not all the time. Like, I think a lot of people eat out a lot, and that's not healthy. But I did do that for 4 years, and now I'm more flexible. And it's really about balance in my life now, because I'm in a prevention mode. I'm not in I sort of look at it as 3 different stages. There's prevent disease, there's support your body through disease, and then there's prevent recurrence. And so I'm in a prevent recurrence mode. And so I've relaxed some. But I don't do... So when people talk about sustainability, I don't do specific diets like paleo or keto or raw diet or any of that, because honestly, they're long-term, they're not sustainable and they're not healthy. You might lose a lot of weight on the keto diet, but eventually it's going to come back on. And if it doesn't come back on, you probably did some damage to your organs that you're going to need to repair. So I believe very strongly in Michael Pollan's theory, or not theory, but his recommendation is eat food, mostly plants. You know, just eat good, clean food. And
instead of coming at it from a point of restriction, you're
correct.
coming at it from a point of, oh, I'm eating these foods because they're so good for me, and here's why. And you're like, it's very intentional what you're eating and how it's affecting you. And I think it's so important for people to understand that.
Well, and my phrase is eat with the intention to heal. And,
Yeah.
you know, you get to that point, from my point of view, by getting in touch with your body. And so, you know, meditation is a really great way. You don't have to meditate for an hour. You know, you can meditate for 5 or 10 minutes, but it's a really great way to sort of slow down and plug into you, you know, and what your body is saying to you. And everybody's has had cravings, right? I mean, oh, I crave chocolate, or I crave whatever. Those cravings are messages from your body. So, for example, if you crave a lot of sugar, really what your body's telling you is you're not getting enough protein. And so you need to understand that, you know, your body is going to call for what it actually needs. So great story that I put in my book, which was a learning experience for me. And at the time, I didn't know how our bodies communicate with us. I was craving cranberries leading up to my diagnosis, which really was not a food I liked at all. But I couldn't get enough cranberries. And come to find out, cranberries are extremely powerful at fighting cancer. So my body, before I even knew I had cancer, was like, hello, you know, we need to fight this. And so getting people to be more intuitive about how they choose their foods, you know, how they cook their foods, how they eat their foods. You know, it's a running joke at our house that I'm a very slow eater. But I'm proud of that, because that gives my body a chance to, you know, understand what food's coming in and where to put it. So yeah, we really underestimate the power of food. And actually meditation. You know, I get a lot of clients in and they come to me for food. They just want to know, what do I have to eat? And they're always surprised when I say food's the easy button. You know, the hard part is learning to tune in and slowing down, and that meditation. And I love people to have Reiki, because I think that helps open them up. And more often than not, pretty much always, the food part of it is shocking to them, because it happens fast and the changes happen fast. So, for example, one of my clients was on a lot of different medications for heart disease, for blood pressure and other issues. After he changed his diet, was doing meditation for, I think it was like a month or two, he went to his doctor, and his doctor said, what are you doing? Everything looks good. And he told him, and the doctor said, oh, well, if you're meditating and doing that, you don't need to be on these drugs. And my client was like, and it didn't occur to you to tell me that before you put me on all these drugs? Like, come on.
Yes, exactly.
But so there's real benefit to learning how to choose your food wisely, and it's not hard. And then to listen to what your body wants.
Kathy, you've talked about Reiki a few times and meditation. So, what I'm wondering is, you know, in addition to the typical Western medicine approach of, you know, you talked about the treatments you went through, and you mentioned this really powerful dietary change. Were there other treatments or practices that you incorporated into your life that you felt played a role in your cancer remission and in maintaining your health today?
So I'm simple, and I really believe that there's simplicity in healing, and you don't have to spend a lot of money and try lots of different things. I found my greatest success was through changing my diet, reducing my stress, basically deepening my spiritual connection. And everybody's got a different one, and whatever that looks like to you. practicing meditation regularly, and Reiki. Those things are all things that you can do at home. We all can learn to give ourselves Reiki. We all can learn to meditate. And I'm not a person who likes to go to regular anything. Like, like I'm doing Pilates now twice a week, and that's so hard for me. Like, just like, I got to go there and get, I want to do this right now. So
Right.
I'm not habitual. So things have to be really easy for me. And, I think at a baseline, I'm probably a little bit lazy. So I try to find things that are easy, but I also don't like things to be super expensive. And I feel like when people charge me a lot of money, I'm not sure, like that makes me a little
Yeah.
uncomfortable. Not that people shouldn't get paid for their work, but I do think,
Right.
in this field, in the integrative or in more unconventional medicine, we have to be really careful that we're not following in the footsteps of conventional practitioners, right? We're breaking
Mhm.
people's banks, because that isn't what it's about. So for me, I try to find things that are sustainable, that I can do in my own home. Um, yes, I had to learn Reiki from a Reiki master, and once I learned it, now I do it at home. I practice it on myself. And of course, now I'm a Reiki master and I teach my clients the same. So that's kind of the long and short of it. I mean, it's not a big mystery. And I guess that's what I want people to know, is that you can hunt and peck forever, and you can try crazy juicing, and you can try, all these different things, or you just kind of settle down into your spirit and
Mm.
have those conversations with yourself, and find that happy balance that you can sustain.
I really love that. And I think, when you provide some very practical but also doable steps, it doesn't really seem quite so overwhelming. I think probably when people are facing a cancer diagnosis, one of the first feelings is panic, and so you might follow those Western medical approaches, but then there's also that mind body connection as well. And I think what you've talked about, doing things sustainably, but feeding your soul and making sure you have that spiritual connection, is such an important part of that healing process. I'd like you for just a minute to talk about Reiki, because I would think that maybe some of our listeners aren't familiar with the practice of Reiki. Could you just explain maybe a little bit about what it is and what you do as a practitioner?
Sure. Excuse me. So Reiki is energy healing. And the word Reiki is universal, Rei, and Ki is energy.
Mm.
And so it's about tapping into universal energy. For me, universal energy comes from God. For other people, it comes from other sources, and that's not important. That what we call it. What's important is that we're tapping into universal energy. And if you think about it, when you're in a room and or a party or whatever, and somebody walks up to you, you're going to have one of two reactions. You're going to either be like, oh yeah, that person makes me feel a little uncomfortable, or you're going to be like, oh yeah, hi, and you're going to welcome them in. And what you're doing is you're feeling energy, right? You're not
Mhm.
sure if you like the energy, or you're sure you like the energies, because we're all part of the same energy source, universal energy.
Mm.
And so Reiki is really about, like, a Reiki master isn't a healer. And I have a little issue with people who call themselves healers because we're channels. So we're basically tuned into Reiki in a way that other people aren't yet, right? We want them to be, but they're not quite there yet. And so we just channel Reiki, and Reiki decides where it goes. So when I'm working on somebody, I'm not necessarily, I mean, there are times where someone comes in and they've got a lot of pain in a certain area, and I'll direct the Reiki there, but I'm a channel, or like a tube, if you will. I'm not, some miraculous person. It's just that I'm tuned into it. I know how to bring it to you to engage your inner healer. And then I want you to learn how to engage your inner healer. But here's the other thing I hear often is that Reiki is for rest and relaxation. Well, yes, you do feel relaxed, but that actually is not why Reiki was developed. It's a treatment. And back in Japan, so long ago, even actually, I think in World War II, they would send Reiki masters on the submarines instead of doctors. Like,
oh, wow.
So it is a way of treating illness or disease or whatever it is. And so I think it's important just to really bring it down to earth. It's not mystical. It's not magical. It's not crystals and all these other things, although I do love my crystals. I'm a rock hound and have been since I was born, but it isn't about that. It's simple, and it's something everybody can learn to do for themselves. It's just tapping into that inner healer. So, like, one of the things that I do every day, sometimes multiple times through the day if I'm having a rough day, and I teach all my clients, is just to stop and focus on just for today. So, there's a lot of work around living in the moment, meditation, that kind of thing. I find this to be really useful because it's tangible. And so it's just for today, I'll be without anger. Just for today, I'll be without fear. Just for today, I will do my work. Just for today, I will be kind to others. And just for today, I will be grateful. And if we just strip it down to just for today, it's not overwhelming anymore. Yeah. And living in the present becomes easier when we remind ourselves of these 5 basically affirmations, but these are the 5 things that we need to do every day. Be without fear, be without anger, be kind to others, do our work, and be grateful. It's that simple. That's not hard. Put it on a Post-it note, stick it in your car, put it at your stove, put it on your mirror, wherever. But that's something we all can tap, and it has an immediate reaction in your body to just like, whew, okay, just for today.
Kathy, I love those intentions. I think they are so great for people to really put a conscious effort into on a daily basis. And do you feel like that helps, you individually and your clients kind of stay healthy in mind and body and spirit, and just kind of stay positive, because that could be challenging.
1,000,000%. I mean, for me, I still have teenage girls, and as my husband points out, somehow there's some weird relationship between the mother and daughter, and the daughters have a hard time with their mom when they're teenagers. And so it's
I'm heading into those years.
No matter what you do and how wonderful your kids are, there's always this little edge, and I find that it really helps me. Well, those affirmations, and then one other thing that I like to say, but they really help me look at the situation in a different way and not take anything personally.
That's huge.
It's not about me. And one of the things that I teach my clients, and I'm also working with my girls on, is observe, don't absorb. So we can observe what's going on around us. We can even observe our reactions to something, but we don't absorb them and make them part of our body, like our cells, because we know through science that when we are happy, it takes about 60 seconds for every cell in our body to experience that happy feeling, and it reduces inflammation immediately. The same is true, though, when we have a negative reaction, when we're angry or we're afraid. 60 seconds to hit every cell, but the reverse effect, it causes inflammation. And if we're doing that throughout our day, causing inflammation, causing inflammation, causing inflammation, that's going to eventually lead to some sort of chronic disease.
I love how you're bringing this mind-body connection into, a way that people really understand.
Oh, yeah.
That's so helpful.
Well, it's just simple. And I've done a lot of the webinars, and I go to a lot of seminars, and I try to see, what else can I learn? And I keep coming back to the same thing, is that we know everything we need to know. We just need to tap into it. We need to learn how to listen. And so,
and there's so much information out there that I think overcomplicates it. So your message of simplicity is exactly what people need to hear. Like, negative emotions and negative thoughts are affecting your physical body. They're causing inflammation. Like, people don't understand that, So that's just so huge to start to, again, make that connection.
Well, and like I said, I am somewhat lazy, and I don't like I don't like routine. I don't like a big, regimen of I've got to take all these supplements. And actually I could talk about supplements for a minute, but I can't sustain that. I operate more on the fly. I operate in the moment. I don't want to have to be tied to, okay, now I have to do, okay, let me just say, my whole family loves Headspace. I do not, because I don't want to be tied to it. I want to be able to meditate when I feel like I want to meditate, whether I take a minute in my parked car or, whatever I'm doing. And I think that that's the empowerment people need, is just to understand that they are in control, and they can choose what they do. They don't have to. For example, I have a lot of people who say, I want to know exactly what you did, because that's what I want to do. And I say, well, you can't do exactly what I did, because you're not exactly me. You're exactly you. Right. So you've got to figure out what fits. I can give you ideas and thoughts and, help you kind of shape a program that fits for you. But it's different for everybody. There is no one size fits all. There is no, Kathy Bero program, Eat with the Intention to Heal, that fits everybody, because we're all individuals and unique. And we need to own that about ourselves, and maybe stop trying to be like everybody else, and do what everybody else is doing to heal. I just find
yes,
power
and
in
that's
that.
where your one-on-one coaching is so helpful, because you kind of help people identify what works for them, and I love that you're doing
that. And I think one of my favorite questions when people reach out to me is they say, so how many or what's the minimum number of sessions you require? And I'm like, I don't know. How long is it going to take you to figure it out? Like, you could be here just one day, and that's fine. I don't have a minimum. I don't, everybody learns at their own pace. So I have one client I've had for 8 months, and I just had to kind of say, I think it's time to move on, because you have everything you need. Now I'm just a crutch, and I'm not good at being a crutch. So, it's time for you to practice that on your own. I have other people who come for 1 or 2 sessions, and they're like, I got it. I'm like, yes, get out there and then teach somebody else, because that's our responsibility. Once we learn, then we got to go out and teach other people, whether it's our family or just our friends. But, when you learn what's at the root of being human, and a spiritual being, you kind of have a responsibility to go teach other people.
Because it's kind of going against the grain of our culture right now.
Yeah.
I mean, it just is. So it's like, this message needs to be heard. Yeah.
Yeah. And
you're right.
And we all know it. I mean, we all go to, we don't all go to church. There's a lot of people that go to church, right? Or they have their spiritual groups because they're searching. And if they just turn inside, it's all right there. It literally is all right there. You carry it with you every single day.
Kathy, when I talked to you in preparation for this interview, it was probably at least a month ago now, one of the things that you said to me was that your goal is just to emphasize the simplicity of healing. And I think today that you've given us so many just very I feel relaxed talking to you, and I think that's maybe that's your aura, your presence coming through, that you're just so deeply, grounded spiritually. But I think that this has been just such a sign of promise for people, and I'm putting myself, in someone's shoes who may have, been diagnosed with cancer, or who has already been through cancer and is just, you know hoping not to have that second diagnosis down the road and wanting to stay in remission. And you've given us so many simple strategies, and that just life can be simple when we're tapping into our emotions and taking time for meditation, just doing simple dietary changes. And I love those, the intentions and affirmations that you gave. I think even for me, just looking at life one day at a time is so important, because I tend to get overwhelmed looking at the big picture, and I have so much to do, and I have all of these deadlines, and I have so much going on, and I go into a tailspin, and I get so overwhelmed. But just, I think for everyone, reducing stress is so huge for everybody. But just to look at life right now. What can we do today? What can we focus on today to make us better? And how powerful that thought of, trying, if we just try to change our attitude, if we just try to smile and be happy, that how it changes our whole biochemistry, really, and can help, ward off disease. I think that, you've given us hope that we can be the driver of our own boat. And I think those were your words when I spoke to you before. I actually wrote that down on a note when I had a conversation with you before, that we really are in control of more than we realize, but that it also doesn't have to be scary and overcomplicated. And I just love your message, like I said, of hope that you can offer to the world. I would encourage everyone in our community to please go pick up a copy of Kathy's book, but also certainly subscribe to her website. I do get her emails. And, if nothing else, to get that list of foods that you talked about, that we can all start and incorporating into our diets today. I think that that's just so important. And I also on my website, I actually have a link to your video, that. And do you have that on your website too? When you were on the video that went viral?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure I
Do
do.
you have a link on your website?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So if people wanted to take a look at that, because I think that that's really impactful as well. Are there any last thoughts that you wanted to share with our audience before we let you
Yeah.
go
You
for
know,
today?
I want people to feel empowered to communicate with their doctors, because my what I promote is integrative medicine, right? I think we need to
Mhm.
combine both Eastern and Western in a more meaningful way. Um, but I think we also need to look for ways to not take so many prescription medications and um, cause more
Mhm.
damage. And I just want to give this example of how your listeners can be empowered to communicate with their doctors. Um, and I think my daughter would be okay with me sharing this, but my youngest daughter, she's had 4 concussions, and her last concussion really caused a lot of trouble. And she's been struggling with, losing her eyesight suddenly, or having a lot of
Mm.
headaches, just getting dizzy in the middle of school. And we've been seeing all these children's specialists, right, and specialists in concussions, and been at the research hospital here. And basically, they just want to keep throwing drugs at her. And so we went to the neuro ophthalmologist a few weeks back, and I just said, things aren't getting better. He did his whole routine all over again, testing her, same tests, took each symptom and said, we can give her medication for this, for this, for this, for this. We get to the bottom of his list, and I said, so basically, you have no idea. And he sort of looked at me, and I said, okay, look, it's obvious you have no idea, because you're just throwing drugs at her. So she's 15 years old. We're not doing that. So let's try one of my exercises. and he He's younger
Nice.
than me, and he maybe looked a little bit annoyed. And I said, okay, so let's imagine for a minute that you are not practicing medicine, that you are practicing the art of medicine. And let's imagine for a minute that you no longer have a protocol box, that you're just standing outside this box. Now, let's take a minute and think about, what have we heard? What have we read? What have we learned at conferences about managing these kind of symptoms in ways other than with drugs? And he sat there for a minute, and then all of a sudden he said, oh, we have a guy across the hall. He makes special glasses. And I was like, huh. So she could maybe have had special glasses back in October that would have reduced all this. And he's like, yeah, I think those might work. Oy vey. So she just got her glasses. We got them on Tuesday. And instantly her headaches are gone. She hasn't had any eyesight issues, no dizziness. And so I say to your listeners, don't be shy with these doctors. It's not that they're intentionally hiding things. It's just that they're so overwhelmed, and it's so much easier for them to stick in the protocol box. This is what they tell me to do. And if I don't, if I do something different, I might get sued. There's that going on. But it's also just that they are cycling patients so fast that they don't have a minute. So you have to slow them down and just say, let's just think about this in a different way. And it works. That's just my most recent example, but I've got a load of examples like that.
Yeah, and just do your research and be your own advocate and ask a lot of questions and try to understand it. And they do maybe get a little annoyed, but you know what? This is your life.
Well,
so it's okay.
Honestly, you're paying them a huge amount of money. So you have the right.
Yes,
you do.
Anyway, so that's what I would leave you all with. Just be bold. Be bold.
Kathy.
Be your own best.
Be bold. Be bold. Thank you so much, Kathy. We really appreciate you being here. If people wanted to reach out to you, can you give us your website and any social media connections?
Sure. I'm so bad with social media. And it is, my website is www.kathymydlachbero.com. So Kathy, Kathy, Mydlachbero.com. Nothing clever, just my name. And then my Facebook page is the same. And then I have a Twitter account I almost never post on, and Instagram, and oh my goodness. I mean, if you have a listener out there who's really good publicist and want to take on a new client, that'd be awesome. I just really, So I'm doing my best. And I was scolding myself, Kim, when you mentioned that you're on my email and you get my emails, because I haven't really been doing a good job keeping up with that either. So I'm going to have to get a little more motivated.
You know what, Kathy, I have to say, I think I've told you this before, that's a breath of fresh air, because I think that is a source of tension and stress. Lori and I talk about it all the time, just social media, that it can be so pressure filled, and it sometimes is not very enjoyable. And, all the hustle of posting and things. And so again, that's where I think stress comes into play, and making sure you're taking care of yourself and honoring yourself and not trying to live up to others' expectations. And you know what? When your emails come out, they're great. And I don't think anybody's sitting on the edge of their seat saying, I didn't get Kathy's email this week. I think we can give ourselves grace in that way. And, and we're all human, but I love your whole approach to life, to stress in general. And you're certainly a role model for me, and I'm sure for Lori and for so many people. So we just so appreciate you being here and taking the time out of your very, very busy schedule to be here with us today.
I'm really so grateful to you, Kim and Lori, and I look forward to seeing what other wonderful things you do. So thank you for including me.
Thank you so much, Kathy.
That's it for today. For more from Kim, you can go to kimmaravich.com. For more from Lori, go to simplyempoweredllc.com. We're always open to listener questions or suggestions for the show. You can email those to contact@awholenewyoupodcast.com. We'd also love it if you joined our Facebook community and followed us on Instagram. Just search for A Whole New You Podcast. And lastly, if you'd be so kind as to leave us a rating and review in iTunes, we would really appreciate that so more people can find our show and join our community. We'll see you next week.